what sparked the decades-long 50 Cent and Fat Joe beef. In hip-hop, beef is basically part of the job description. It's a clash of egos, a fight for the top spot, and sometimes it gets way too real. But what happens when a feud doesn't start with a diss track or a fight, but with just picking a side? That's the story of 50 Cent and Fat Joe, two New York titans whose rivalry was more than just music. It was a Cold War that cost millions of dollars, shifted the balance of power in the industry, and it all got kicked off by one feature on one song. A song that forced Fat Joe to choose a side in a war he never really wanted to be in, until he had no choice. It all started with a phone call. Ja Rule, who was on top of the world in the early 2000s, was putting together a monster track for his city called New York. He needed a lineup that screamed authentic NYC, so he called up Jadakiss from Yonkers and the Don of the Bronx himself, Fat Joe. On paper, it was a classic New York unity anthem, but in reality, it was a declaration of war. By stepping into that booth, Fat Joe had no idea he was lighting the fuse on one of hip-hop's most personal issues, a choice that would follow him for nearly 20 years. So, how could one song cause so much drama? Well, you have to understand the map of New York hip-hop back then. In the early 2000s, the scene was a powder keg. You had the established kings like Fat Joe Terror Squad and Ja Rule Murder Inc. Joe was a certified legend, a guy with so much power and respect that he called himself the New York Terror. Ja Rule was a pop-shot juggernaut, dominating the radio. And then 50 Cent happened. Curtis Jackson wasn't just another rapper, he was a hurricane. After famously surviving being shot 9 times, 50 entered the game feeling invincible, with a massive chip on his shoulder and a take-no-prisoners mentality. His number one target was Ja Rule and the entire Murder Inc. empire. Their beef was already deep, ugly, and personal, spilling from the streets onto the radio, and many believe it was derailing Ja Rule's career. 50's strategy was simple and brutal. Crush your enemy completely. He operated on a principle of total war. If you were with his enemy, you were his enemy. There was no middle ground. In a 2024 interview, 50 Cent laid it out himself. My whole beef with Fat Joe was really his loyalty. It wasn't personal at first, it was strategic. Fat Joe was already tight with Ja Rule. They had the massive 2002 hit What's Love together, and their friendship was solid. For 50 Cent, that alliance was a red flag. Fat Joe was a powerful player, and his loyalty to Murder Inc. made him a target simply by association. The song New York, in 2004, that association was cemented on wax. Ja Rule released New York, featuring Fat Joe, and the track itself was a hard-hitting love letter to the city. But Ja Rule's verse contained some not-so-subliminal shots aimed right at 50 Cent and his G-Unit crew. He rapped about an apprentice being fired, a clear jab at 50, and mocked G-Unit member Lloyd Banks' hit song On Fire. For 50 Cent, this wasn't just a song, it was a united front against it. In his eyes, Jadakiss and, more importantly, Fat Joe had publicly chosen a side. The loyalty he respected was now aimed against him, and that was all it took. The fuse was lit. 50, a master of psychological warfare, knew he had to respond. And his response wasn't just going to be aimed at Ja Rule. It would be a direct assault on everyone who stood with him. The release of New York marked the official start of the hostility between two artists who, by their own admission, had no personal issues with each other before this moment. It was a conflict born entirely from loyalty. By standing with his friend, Fat Joe was now in the direct line of fire from hip-hop's most relentless new force. The war was on. 50 Cent's retaliation was fast, vicious, and very public. In 2005, he had dropped the now infamous diss track Piggy Bank from his blockbuster album, The Massacre. The song was a lyrical hit list, and Fat Joe was a prime target. 50's lines were designed to humiliate, questioning Joe Comartia's success with the scathing, "That fathead, asterisk, I thought lean back was his DA club. My ST sold 11 mil. His ST was a dub." The animated music video was even more disrespectful, portraying Fat Joe as an overweight washed-up boxer getting knocked out cold. Of course, Fat Joe, never one to back down, fired back with his own diss track, My FoFo, calling Curtis Jackson a fake thug, on steroids hiding in his house. The beef had now escalated from an issue of association to a direct, personal war of words. But it wouldn't stay on wax for long. The tension boiled over at the 2005 MTV Video Music Awards. The atmosphere was electric with hostility. In his memoir, Fat Joe described how 50 Cent and the entire G-Unit roster spent the night trying to antagonize him. When it was Joe's turn to present an award, G-Unit members heckled him from the audience. Joe, feeling the pressure, grabbed the mic and delivered a legendary jab. "I feel safe with all the police protection, courtesy of G." The crowd erupted. The shot was a clear reference to the perception that 50 Cent and his crew were in. Later that night, 50 took the stage to perform and fired back with unfiltered rage, yelling, "Fat Joe is pussy. Pussy boy. Fuck boy." The beef was no longer just music. It was a public spectacle with real-world consequences. A few days after the VM, a massive, reported $20 million endorsement deal for a Fat Joe Jordan sneaker was officially dead. Jordan told him, "You're too hot right now. I'm not into all that rap beef." The rivalry had cost him a fortune. It's a crazy example of how fast things can get out of hand in this industry. If you find these deep dives into hip-hop history fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a breakdown. Now, let's get back to how this decade-long war finally came to an end. For years after the VMAs, the two rappers didn't see each other in person for nearly 7 years. Promoters booked them on separate shows, and the beef became a defining feature of their careers. Fat Joe later admitted he was prepared to take the feud to his grave, stating, "If we would have bumped heads somewhere, it would have went down physically 100%. But in 2012, a tragedy occurred that would change everything. Their mutual friend and legendary music executive, Chris Lighty, passed away. His death sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and forced many, including 50 and Joe, to reevaluate what was important. They both attended the funeral but didn't interact. The true moment of reconciliation came shortly after, at the Bet Hip Hop Awards, during a tribute for Lighty. Fat Joe was on stage, tense and ready for a confrontation, knowing 50 was also there to perform. As Joe finished his set, 50 Cent walked over, stood right next to him, and as the music stopped, he put his hand out. He said, "Peace for Chris Lighty." Chris Lighty wanted peace. In that moment, everything changed. Joe, shocked by the gesture, shook his hand. The audience erupted, and a decade of hostility began to melt away. Fat Joe later reflected on the moment, realizing it's important. "I think we have an obligation, a responsibility to show these young brothers that beefing over words can be squashed," he said. Conclusion: the once bitter rivals are not just cordial, they are friends. In 2024, 50 Cent went as far as to call Fat Joe his best friend, acknowledging that the very thing that started there, Beef Joe's unwavering loyalty, is what he now admires most about him. Both have admitted the feud was a waste of time, fueled by their competitive natures and similarities. They are often seen courtside at Knicks games, laughing together, a sight that would have been unimaginable in 2005. The story of 50 Cent and Fat Joe serves as a powerful lesson. It shows how loyalty in the high-stakes world of hip-hop can be seen as aggression, and how quickly a conflict over alliances can spiral into a personal and costly war. But it's also a story of growth and maturity. Their journey from bitter enemies to close friends sparked by a tragic loss shows that even the most entrenched beefs can be resolved, leaving behind a legacy that isn't about the conflict itself, but about the peace that ultimately followed.